They're gonna talk to us a little bit. You know, when we started looking through the research on leadership skills, what we found was that the leadership skills and the things that make us the kind of leaders that people want to hire are the same thing. So we brought in some business leaders who want to talk to us a little bit, answer a few questions. But there's one person that really wanted to spend a couple minutes talking to you. I don't know if you've, I mentioned earlier that I'm the area director for Joni and Friends. You know, there's actually some people that are a little younger than me that don't realize there's an actual Joni connected with Joni and Friends. About 40 years ago, she took a dive in the Chesapeake Bay, broke her neck, and through that became one of the strongest, most important disability advocates ever. And I asked her to take a couple of minutes and just, what would she say to herself or to me back when we were 20? What would she have to say to us? So let's take a look at that.
I was 17 years old, athletic, took a dive and bang, I can't use my hands, I can't move, my legs, everything's paralyzed. I'm a quadriplegic. The doctor announced that I had severed my spinal cord at the fourth cervical level, that I'd never use my hands or my legs for the rest of my life, and he walked out of the door. I can't live like this. And I just sank into depression. A Christian friend shared with me, Joni, God permits what he hates to accomplish that which he loves. I realized God takes no pleasure in my spinal cord injury, but he loves the way he is changing me in it and encouraging others through it. Psalm 10 says that God hears the cry of the afflicted. His heart goes out to those with disabilities. He is filled with compassion for those with special needs. I'm Joni Eareckson Tada. I'm a Christian author, speaker, advocate, painter. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I do all those things. But I do them because I want people to know the God that I love. I would not trade this intimacy with God, this sweetness, this nearness, this tenderness, this preciousness of faith come alive in my life. I wouldn't trade it for any amount of walking. There are 1 billion people with disabilities in the world, 80% of whom live in developing nations. That is, to me, overwhelming. I want to do everything I can to make a difference in their lives. I think God is using people with disabilities to wake up the church. God is up to something big.
Este es mi libro, mi historia. Sí, en este libro. Outwardly, our bodies are wasting away, but inwardly, we're being renewed day by day.
It looks as though the foot pedals need to come up just a little bit.
Certainly.
My husband Ken and I love doing Joni and Friends together. Whether it's going to a family retreat and hanging out with other couples, whether it's delivering wheelchairs and Bibles.
Is a Bible in the Spanish language?
Y acá más importante es una Biblia.
We want to get the word out. God has not abandoned those with disabilities. No, he is working through them. God's power always shows up best through weakness. The Bible says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Defend the rights of the weak and the needy. And we do that at Joni and Friends. Through our Christian Institute on Disability, we are advocates. We are championing the disabled, whether it's right to life, end-of-life issues, physician-assisted suicide, euthanasia. We speak God's truth. Joni and Friends stands for the spark that started the movement to take the gospel where the world is bleeding out of control. I want to be there. I've got a message to share. I would rather be in this wheelchair knowing him than on my feet without him, and that is worth living for. Good afternoon, friends. I'm Joni Eareckson Tada. And I sure hope the video you just saw communicates my drive, my enthusiasm, and passion
for what we're doing at Joni and Friends. Yes, as you can see from that video a moment ago, I enjoy making the most of my leadership position as a Chief Executive Officer and International Disability Advocate. But it wasn't always that way. Believe me, there was a time shortly after I broke my neck in that diving accident. I was frozen, I was numb, I was hopeless, I was frightened. Basically, I was stuck. I was stuck back in the past, stuck in a world of what ifs. What if I had not gone to the beach that day and had not taken that dive? Such thoughts pushed me back into the past and kept me suffocated under depression. But thank God there were Christians who came alongside me and provided help and hope. Because back then, I was way too weak. I was too paralyzed to envision success for myself. But these Christians did. And their compassion, hands-on love, and words of hope from the Bible made all the difference. Kind of like as Oswald Chambers once said, quote, "Leave the broken, irreversible past in God's hands and step out into the invincible future with Him." And as I wheeled out into that future, I began to see that God wanted me to pass on the blessings, pass on the insights and the encouragement to others. But as I dug deeper into God's Word, I was surprised to see that God somehow, He delighted in handpicking people for leadership who, at least on the surface, appeared ungifted, ill-trained, unequipped, and very, very weak, very unlikely. I mean, just take the example of Gideon. God called him to go up into battle against the Midianites, and what does God do? He whittles that man's army down to a mere 300 people. That's no way to win a war. And look at David. I mean, going up against Goliath, you would have expected that there would be some tall, strong soldier that God would have picked, but no. He picks a pimply-faced teenage kid, a shepherd boy, to go up into battle against Goliath. That's no way to fell a giant. And then look at Sarah. He promises that the nation Israel should come from her womb. But oh my goodness, she's like in her 90s. I mean, that's impossible. So why does God pick these people to get a job done? Well, so that when Gideon would slay the Midianites, and when David would slay Goliath, and when Sarah would give birth to a beautiful bouncing baby boy, the whole world would know that God had done it and not man. That's the way God delights in getting things done. I mean, take the way God designed His gospel to go forth, how His kingdom should be advanced. Now, if I were God, how would I get the job done? Well, first I would probably pick the smartest men and women possible to be on my strategy team, the PhDs, the college professors, the top corporate executives. Then I would draft the world's sharpest millionaires to finance the operation. Oh, and my public relations people would be the most effective communicators to be found anywhere, tops in their field. To qualify even as a mere rank and file member of my team, a person would have to be athletic, bright, attractive. Weak people need not apply. Those with physical defects, forget it. People who might slow down my progress, never. Those to whom the world is not naturally attracted, no way. A man or a woman whose life is filled with problems, Thank God I am not running the world and advancing the gospel in that manner. God is in charge. And God opens His arms to the ungifted, the ill-equipped, the untrained, the unlovely, the weak, the unlikely. That's because of His great love. And it's also because this is the way God does things to bring maximum glory to Himself. The Apostle Paul told the Corinthian Christians to look around and realize that, on the whole, God had called people who, by human standards, were neither wise, influential, nor of noble birth. Paul is saying that God deliberately chooses weak and limited candidates to get His work done so that, when the job is accomplished, the glory goes to Him and not to us. And in that way, the gospel goes forth. The kingdom is advanced in power and in might. It meant that for the first decade or so in ministry, I had to forget everything I had ever been taught about personal power leading to effective leadership. Confidence, charisma, and chutzpah count for very, very little over the long haul, because the leaders that God chooses are more broken than strong. They are more damaged than whole. They are more troubled than secure. The most effective leaders don't rise to power in spite of their weakness. No, they lead with power because of their weakness. And how do we know they're effective? Because their followers stay hot on their heels, like Jesus. I mean, you look close at the life of Jesus and you will discover that he led with power because of his weakness and humility. If you study the life of the world's greatest leader, Jesus Christ, you learn two things. He was a visionary, that is, he could set a destination for his followers. He could move forward with unflinching confidence, yet at the same time, he was a servant, getting down on his hands and knees and washing the feet of his disciples, even the man who would betray him. Jesus led by casting the vision, and then he flipped the coin and modeled the vision, empowering and supporting everybody around him. For example, look at the vision Jesus casts in Luke chapter 14, verses 13 to 14. He says, quote, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or relatives or your rich neighbors. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor and the crippled." Then later in the same chapter, he gets even more visionary. He says, "Go out into the streets and the alleys of the towns, into the highways and byways and country lanes, find the disabled and bring them in so that my Father's house might be full." Now, that's vision. That's setting the course and giving direction. But then Jesus flips the coin. He models that vision. So much so that it absolutely irks his disciples, who kept expecting him to act like a real king and quit hanging around with all these know-nothings. Just look at his encounter with Bartimaeus, begging by the side of the road. As hundreds looked on, the most important prophet to come along in centuries stooped. He stopped and he stooped to serve a blind beggar. And in doing so, Jesus modeled a true vision of leadership for us all. It was through Jesus that I learned that my weakness, my wheelchair, is my strongest asset if I want to be a godly leader. And I trust that you will see your disability in the same light. Let God work through it. Let him use your disabling condition as a platform to showcase his power and his grace. Remember, the most effective leaders do not rise to power in spite of their weakness. They lead with power because of their weakness. From all of us at Joni and Friends out here in Southern California, thanks for listening.